I've had some interesting conversations this week around purification. And really, they've just been interesting. Things I've learned, things that have encouraged me and pointed me. I've seen things I'd never seen before, seen things in ways I had never seen them before. And I think that's a powerful thing. As a matter of fact, as I left the service last week, the first service, I was reminded by someone, they were talking about how the Jewish people had survived many situations because of these purification practices that they had. And so I went back and did some reading, especially in the 14th century during the Black Plague. You found that the Jews, the anti-Semitism rose during that time because the Jews practiced such purity. They washed their clothes, they washed their hands, they washed their bodies, they separated for 7 days, 14 days, and so they survived many of the plagues that other cultures did not, and people fought against them. They were like, these people, there's something different about them. We need to fix that. We need to kill them off, and we've seen that over time. And I just thought it was interesting that God would put some things in places long before they ever needed them. As a matter of fact, I was reminded this past week of the clothes. Like, I don't know, I wonder if do y'all ever wonder if the clothes they wore came with instructions? If you do this, you got to wash it. If you do this, you got to burn it. If you do this, you got to let it stay in the closet for 7 days. I don't know, I wanted those things. And this week, Barbara called me. She said, well, not called me, but I was close by. She said, come over here and cut this book out of my jeans. She had got a new pair of jeans. She said, cut this book out of my jeans. And what she was talking about is inside of her jeans were 2 tags. And I'm hiding the size because I know better. 2 like long tags, all right? It don't matter what the size is, you don't show it, okay? Front and back. Okay, of writing. Some of it's Chinese, some of it's Spanish, some of it's French, and all kinds of instructions. And I'm like, who wants to wear clothes with this on the inside? But I don't know if y'all have noticed, like more and more clothes have bigger and bigger tags. They're longer, and there'll be 2 or 3 tags in there. So I cut it out, and I said, I'm going to use this Sunday in my sermon, because I wondered if, when you got clothes, did they have these big, long instruction manuals in them to tell you exactly when you could wear it and how you could wear it and how you were supposed to care for it, how you were supposed to wash it, how you were supposed to destroy it, if it touched the wrong thing, And I know y'all's mind probably don't work like that, but that's exactly what I was thinking. So before we jump into the sermon, if we're taking communion at the end of the service, if you did not get a communion packet when you came in, slip up your hand. Just hold up your hand, and one of the deacons will bring you one. Yeah, just keep your hand up until they get to you. They're coming, and they'll be right there, and I'm going to keep talking while we do this. So if this is your first time here, or your first time in a long time, we're reading through the Bible together in chronological order. And so if you haven't been reading along with us, I would challenge you to do so. You can go to oneSingleStory.com. So that's the website we're using that we have developed for this. You'll find podcasts every day. You'll find the reading plan. You'll find sermons, Bible teaching, just about every resource that we could come up with. We've provided for you. You can find it there. And I would encourage you, if you haven't started reading yet and you want to start with us, start today, okay? Because the good thing about starting today is it gets better, right? The bad part about starting in the beginning is you get Genesis, you get the creation, and then you get Noah and the ark, and then you get 5,000 chapters of purification practices, and you can't wear this, and you got to wear this, and you can't go here, and you got to go there, and you're like, oh my Lord, please, when is this ever going to end? And you got a couple of more books. I just want to tell y'all, this is my encouragement to you. It ain't going to end tomorrow, okay? It's gonna keep on like that. But if you're just starting today, by the time we get to some good stuff, you'll be going, oh, it's getting better. It gets like a good book. It's getting better. And so I would encourage you just to start today and read along with us. We would love to have you a part of that. And so today we're going to look at a story that involves preachers' kids. I was a preacher's kid, grew up a preacher's kid. And they say preachers' kids are the worst, and they are. But it's because they hung out with the deacons' kids. Just want to be clear about where we learned our behavior from. But I grew up in a pastor's home, and that's all I ever knew. So my dad, as most of you know, he went to NC State, pulp and paper engineer, came to Plymouth to work at Weyerhaeuser. He worked it there about probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I'm not sure. But when I was 9 months old, he accepted the call in the ministry and went to pastor church, left Weyerhaeuser and never looked back. And we moved to Wallace, North Carolina. That was his first church. And so I only knew growing up in church. And that's all I've ever known, to be honest with you. I mean, I would say they're probably, if I've never missed more than 2 Sundays in a row. And that was intentional. I was traveling somewhere. I mean, I've been in church every Sunday all of my life, even until now. And I love church. I love being in church. I love being with people. But growing up in church, some of the things that you consider to be sacred, I probably didn't. Okay? There were probably some things that you saw and you're like, oh, that's, super spiritual. And I just took it for granted. Or I'd gotten used to it, or I just thought it was a bunch of malarkey or whatever. There's a lot of reasons. And so there were things that I was comfortable with that many of you were not. And I'm going to share a couple of those things with you this morning. And some of you are going to get itchy and go, oh, my Lord, I can't believe you would do that. But that's just part of it. As a matter of fact, still, I'll watch videos sometimes, maybe TikTok or Facebook, and there'll be some strange video from a church, and I'm dying laughing. Barbara said, you can't laugh at that. Yes, I can. It's laughter worthy. I mean, if they're going to do that in church, you have to laugh at it. I mean, because I've seen real and I've seen fake. I've seen things that I thought were genuine, and I've seen things that were just completely disingenuous. And so I things that I grew up around, you might be offended by. So, for example, I grew up in a really strict environment. We didn't go swimming with girls. Boys didn't. And y'all are like, that's weird. But I'm telling you, when you stood before the church, it's like you committed to not swimming with members of the opposite sex other than your immediate family. And if some of you grew up in a similar environment, so you know what I'm talking about. But like that was it. So we didn't go to the beach. Okay, beach was not in our vocabulary. As a matter of fact, we said coast. Christian people said coast. If you said the beach, we knew who you were. We went to the coast. We didn't go to the beach. We didn't swim with other people. We just didn't. I got to swim at youth camp. That was the most exciting part about youth camp, is I get to swim in a pool with a bunch of boys. That's what it was. But when we had a baptistry for the first time at the church in Wilmington, when my dad pastored there. So he moved from Wallace to Wilmington, and they built a new church, and they had a baptistry in it. And when they would fill it up and it would get warm, me and my brother would go over and swim in our underwear in the baptistry, because we didn't own swimsuits. I mean, that's what we're going to use them for, once a year. And I don't know what it was like to get baptized in that water after we swam in it. But and some of you are going, oh my Lord, that's terrible. But I'm just saying that I'm telling you things that may have been a little bit more comfortable for me or common for me that you would consider to be a little bit more sacred. Another one of those things that I would tell you about is one of the churches Dad pastored. I probably could name it, but I'm not 100% sure. They used oyster crackers for communion. Oyster crackers make a great snack. And I figured out where the communion oyster crackers were. And so me and my brother, we would go in and we'd have communion snacks. That's what we would have. And whenever we were hungry. And they never found out, as far as I knew. Maybe they thought the rats were eating them. I don't know. But they'd be missing by the handfuls. And I'm sure we won't clean looking back on it. Like, I'm sure we left some scattered around on the floor as I think about it. But I watched, like I said, my wife, she will get all beside herself. Like, you shouldn't laugh at that. If y'all remember, a few years back, I showed you a video in a sermon of an independent fundamental Baptist church. But they were shouted. So if y'all don't know what shouting is, they get happy, run, scream. They get loud. And anyway, this was a shouting Baptist church. And for some of y'all think that's a paradox. But this old guy sang, I'll Be Gone. You can look this up on YouTube. It's one of the best videos that has ever come to YouTube, okay? This old guy sings, I'll Be Gone, and he gets to the chorus, and the church breaks out in pandemonium. Do y'all remember me showing this video when I was in a sermon? And the people are running around. This guy runs down the middle aisle, and he's swinging his coat over his head, and he slings his coat, and it drapes over the man's head who's singing the song. This guy comes around the corner and he runs up on the stage and he grabs a hold of the back pew and he's jumping up and down on it and he flips over in the baptistry. Water goes everywhere. And I am rolling. Like, this is hilarious to me because I see things and, you know, some of you, I know right now it's making you uneasy. You're afraid God's going to strike me dead for telling this. But if it makes you feel any better, I just finished a book that's coming out sometime this year of 100 funniest things I've ever seen in church. And some of y'all are going to be offended when you read it. I'm 100% sure. But I've seen some crazy stuff happen in church. And I wrote some of those stories. One of the things, only people that grew up in a Pentecostal environment will appreciate the one I'm getting ready to tell. So it would be not uncommon for famous Pentecostal preachers to invite people up to the front to pray for them, okay? And many times their expectation is when they would pray for them, they would fall out, okay? Now, let me stop right here because I didn't offer this disclaimer before, so I'm going to offer it before now. So I have seen real and I have seen fake. I have seen people who I thought were genuine. I've seen people slain in the spirit, so we can talk about that another time. That's not this sermon. I've seen other times where it wasn't fake, but me and my buddies, we had what we called courtesy drops. So if you went up, because some of them would get kind of rough with you. You know, they would put their hand on your head, and if you didn't go down, they would hold your shoulder, and they'd push your head back until you wish you went down. And so to save a trip to the chiropractor, we'd give them a courtesy drop. And see, some of y'all are going, oh, you're a terrible preacher. I'm just telling y'all, like, I've seen everything, you know. And like I said, and part of the reason why I can say that is because I've seen the Spirit of God genuinely move. I saw a guy running around a building one night, and the roof was higher than this one. So, God, I'm going to hijack my sermon right now. He was running full blast at a wall. He ran up the wall about 20 feet, turned on a pivot, ran straight down the wall, and kept right on going. Now, you can explain that ever how you want to. I'm just going to say God was involved. All right, that's my take on that. But I've seen other things where they weren't genuine. Okay, and so whatever your take is, that's fine. We can talk about it another time. But what I will tell you is that sometimes when you grow up around those things, some of those things become common. They become commonplace. They become ordinary. And you take certain things for granted. You might make fun of things that other people are really moved by, touched by, ministered to by. And there's this challenge, there's this tension that's present in these places that we don't take things make things too common. We don't take things too much for granted. So today we're going to talk about this concept of priestly conduct, and we're going to look at the danger of how things can become common and what we need to be aware of and what we can learn. So we're going to look at Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, and I hope there are some things that we can learn from this. I hope maybe you'll leave with some new questions that you didn't have before, and maybe some answers that you didn't have previously as well. So here's the first thing. Familiarity breeds contempt. We all take things for granted. Every one of us in this room take things for granted. We take jobs for granted. We think we deserve to be here. We're owed what we do, and sometimes our work ethic becomes less because we think it is something that we deserve, and so we take a job for granted, and we don't appreciate the blessing that it is in our lives. Sometimes we don't appreciate it until it's too late. Sometimes I would say this, you know, so I shared, I think it was in a previous podcast, we were recording ahead, so I'm not sure, but I think it was last week sometime, we were talking about the ordination of priest. And so in church, I've been ordained twice as a pastor. The first time I was a part of a denomination that I grew up in, my dad was a part of it. That's the tribe I grew up in, and my brother was a pastor as well. My brother pastored what is Forest Park now, so he was part of that moving. But before, when he first went there, the church was behind headlights in an old cinder block building. That's where it had been for ages, probably 50 years. And that's the only marker I can give you to tell you where it's at. So I'm sorry about that, but that's the only way I know how to tell you to get there is you go to headlights and turn right, and it's a little cinder block building right there on the left. And that's where the church was for about 50 years. And my brother and I, the state bishop came down. My brother and I got ordained at the same time. And I remember what that was like, what that night was like. It was special because it was me and my brother. My mom and dad were there, and but I also remember when I got ordained here at Open Door, and the difference between the two for me was when I got ordained there, I felt like it was something I earned. When I got ordained here, I felt like it was an opportunity I had been given. And our approach to life in general changes depending on how we view things. If we view things as something we've earned, we'll often take things for granted. If we view it as an opportunity we've been given, it will change how we say and what we do about those things. We take our spouses for granted. That's not uncommon. Like we get married, when we're dating, we're careful about what we say. We're careful about what we wear. We're careful about where we go. We're careful to open the door. And then we get married and a little bit of time goes by and those things begin to fall away and we're careful about nothing. And then we say, okay, we don't love each other anymore. Well, some of that is because we have taken them for granted. We have reached a place of familiarity where we now have contempt. I would say that also happens with God. That in our relationship with God, when things are desperate, when we need something, when we're really challenged, when we're broken, when we're hurt, when we need healing, we're praying, we're seeking God, we're in church every Sunday, but you let things go up and to the right long enough to where we're blessed, we have money in the bank, our kids are doing well, our marriage seems to be doing pretty good, and then the things of God become familiar, and we're not as intentional about those things as we once were. Well, I want to show you a couple of things in this story today. Leviticus chapter 10, let's begin reading. It says, Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, put coals of fire in their incense burners and sprinkled incense over them. In this way, they disobeyed the Lord by burning before him the wrong kind of fire, different than he had commanded. So fire blazed forth from the Lord's presence and burned them up, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord meant when he said, I will display my holiness through those who come near me. I will display my glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. Then Moses called for Mishael and Elzaphan, Aaron's cousins, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel. He said to them, come forward and carry away the bodies of your relatives from in front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp. So they came forward and picked them up by their garments and carried them out of the camp just as Moses had commanded. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, do not show grief by leaving your hair uncombed or by tearing your clothes. If you do, you will die, and the Lord's anger will strike the whole community of Israel. However, the rest of the Israelites, your relatives, may mourn because of the Lord's fiery destruction on Nadab and Abihu, but you must not leave the entrance of the tabernacle or you will die, for you have been anointed with the Lord's anointing oil. So they did as Moses commanded. Now, apparently, we don't have specified clarity on what they did wrong other than they took fire from someplace they shouldn't have and were burning it before the Lord. God had given them some specific commands. This is the order, A, B, C, and D. And somewhere they had decided to take, maybe they brought fire from outside the tabernacle. Maybe they brought some incense they had picked up at a vendor down the street. Maybe they had picked it up off the wrong altar. I don't know. They may have put it in the wrong pan. But the Bible, I grew up with the terminology strange fire, but the Bible says they used different fire than what they had been commanded to do. And it is clearly a careless act, not a mistake. Okay, so they didn't just, oops, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. They clearly were being careless about what they were doing. I'll tell you later why I think that is. I think there's some indication here why they were being careless, but clearly they were being careless and they weren't just making a mistake. But it says, he says to them in like verse 3, he says, I want to display my holiness through you. I want to display my glory through you. That's quite a burden for them to have to bear, for people to be able to see God through them, for their lives to reflect the glory of God or the holiness of God. But I'll be honest with you, as we've been called to be a kingdom of priests, when you get to the New Testament, we're all priests, every one of us. We're all called to reflect the holiness of God. We're all called to reflect the glory of God. And we have to live lives. You know, there are songs that have been written, books that have been written. It says, you're the only Jesus some will ever see. You're the only Bible some will ever read. You know, there are lots of writings about this concept that you may be the only indication of Jesus that anybody ever gets. And so is your life reflecting his holiness? Is your life reflecting his glory? When people talk to you, when they come in contact with you, do they walk away having a better picture of Jesus, or is their picture of Jesus a little bit more muddy, a little bit more cloudy? Is it not evident? I'll be honest, you know, there have been times that I've walked away from conversations and interactions where I go, man, they didn't see anything but me, or worse. Right? They didn't see Jesus at all. And we have to be careful that we understand that we're called to reflect his holiness, that we're called to reflect his glory, that we're called to show people what God looks like and how he would be here on this earth. There were a couple of things that I noticed. In this passage I'd never seen before. I'll share two of them, one now and one in just a few moments. But the first thing I noticed I had never seen, I always heard this message preached that this consuming fire came down and consumed them, and they were gone. And I just assumed they were gone. But that's not what this passage says. It says the fire came down, a consuming fire is what it says. But it says after they're dead, their two cousins are called to carry them away. And when they carried them away, they carried them by their clothes. Okay, so if you're going to burn, if you get in a fire, the first thing that's going to burn up is your clothes, by the way, okay? That's going to be the first thing that's going to go, and then your flesh, and then the rest of you are going to go. Some kind of fire burned them up, but left their clothes in place. I don't know if it was a consuming fire from the inside out. I don't know. I don't know if it was a fire like Moses saw in the desert, in the wilderness, where it was burning in the bush, but it didn't consume the bush. That's how it's described. I don't know if that's what it was. I would like to know. I'd never seen that before. What kind of fire consumed them that they died, but it didn't burn their clothes up and it didn't burn their bodies up, because it says they carried them outside of the camp. Now, the other thing that I noticed, well, this wasn't new, but it's something I want to point out. He tells Aaron, and he tells the other two that are present, y'all can't mourn. You can't cry. You got to comb your hair. You notice it says Aaron was silent. He said nothing. I'll tell you why. This is my theory, okay? This is not explicit. This is my theory. I think Aaron assumed some of the responsibility for allowing to happen what had happened. And here's the thing we need to understand as leaders. God was holding them accountable. Everybody else can mourn, but y'all can't mourn. Y'all played a role in this. And this is the thing we need to understand. As leaders, we are not just responsible for ourselves. We are responsible for other people. We're responsible for how we lead them, how we care for them, the things we show them, how we train them, how we help them, the word that we speak to them. We're responsible for those things. And we could just say, it's my life, I'll live it like I want to, and this their life, they'll live it like they want to. We have to live a life that allows others around us to grow. And we have responsibilities beyond ourselves. And so I think one of the things here is that we have to understand is as leaders have more responsibility than other people do. Second thing, carelessness leads to recklessness. Like they say, don't text and drive. Right? It's not a confession, a denial, or an admission. It's what they say. But here's the reason why. The slightest distraction can kill you. Not minutes, not even seconds, a split second. Last statistic I saw said that distractions by mobile devices now was the number one killer in automobile accidents above alcohol. Because we're distracted. Not a lot. Okay, you understand? I mean, and listen, and you're like, well, I won't text. Don't look at Facebook. Don't respond to an email. You know, all of those things put you in danger of making a poor decision or not being able to make a decision. That's the problem. See, what a distraction does is it keeps you from being able to make a decision that you'd normally be able to make. You don't see it coming. You know, you're not prepared. You can't brake. You can't turn. You don't know what you're doing. That's what a distraction does. They'll tell you, don't, on the side of some medicines, it says, don't operate machinery when you take this medicine. There's a reason that's there. You know, because it will distract you. It will turn your attention. It will impede your judgment to the point that you can't do what you need to do. You can be distracted even by your spouse. I would say typically it's men that are distracted by their spouses more than women, at least from a physical standpoint. Men will have their eyes. They can get distracted, right? That's right. Your wife distracts you. She should. You know what I'm saying? That's time out. That's why that is why Adam ate that fruit in the garden. Right? She was naked and had food. What other answer is he going to give? Yes, ma'am. Whatever you say. Right? That's the truth of it. And the distraction messed him all up. Right? And so you have to understand that things can distract you, and you have to be aware of that. The story goes on like this. It says, then the Lord said to Aaron, you and your descendants must never drink wine or any other alcoholic drink before going into the tabernacle. If you do, you will die. This is a permanent law for you, and it must be observed from generation to generation. You must distinguish between what is sacred and what is common, what is ceremonially clean and what is ceremonially unclean. And I'm struggling with ceremonially today for some reason. Unclean and what is clean. And you must teach the Israelites all the decrees that the Lord has given them through Moses. So apparently this problem has happened, and God says, okay, I need to address this. And what it appears, what it implies, is that the reason why Nadab and Abihu brought strange fire or chose the wrong fire is because they were drunk. And God has to go back and give them a warning label because it's happened. Now we need to address this. I think he gave them credit that they wouldn't get drunk and do it, come in and try to perform the ceremonies, but instead they did. And now he's having to backtrack and say, you can't do this. It's why we have warning labels anyway, right? How many of y'all ever seen Bill Engvall, Here's Your Sign? Yeah, some of you have, right? And my favorite one is the warning label on Preparation H. It says, please do not take orally, right? The reason that's there, he says, is because somebody wrote a letter into Preparation H and said, I've been taking your product for about 6 weeks now. My hemorrhoids aren't any better, but my mouth's drawn up so small I can't eat a jelly bean. Right? It was they gave them the benefit of the doubt beforehand, but then somebody misused it and they had to clarify it after the fact. Here, apparently, God had to come back and clarify, don't be drunk. As a matter of fact, he says, don't even drink any kind. Now, I grew up in a teetotal environment. I don't teach teetotaling now. I think the Bible offers the ability to drink alcohol, but it never gives you the ability to be drunk. Ever. It always, 100% of the time, forbids drunkenness. And here's the other thing I would tell you about alcohol. I have never seen anybody drink and get smarter. Ever. Not one time have I ever seen anybody IQ start to rise as the bottle got lower. Never, not one time. I've seen them get louder. I've seen them talk more. I've seen them get angrier. I've seen them get emotional. But I've never seen them get smarter. And here he's telling them, like, you can't drink before you go in because you got to make some discerning choices between what is clean and what is unclean, what is right and what is wrong. Now, here's what I want to tell you about discernment and judgment. I think the Bible forbids drunkenness, but that's not the only thing that can hinder your judgment. You can be in relationships that hinder your judgment. You can have jobs that hinder your judgment. You can watch things that hinder your judgment. You can go places that hinder your judgment. You can be addicted to other things that hinder your judgment. Listen, if it is making it difficult for you to discern, to distinguish between good and bad, right and wrong, wise and unwise, which I think is the best question to ask yourself. You need to get rid of it out of your life. If it is causing you not be able to discern what you should do, we've done a book series here before. Andy Stanley says the best question ever is it wise or is it unwise? Not is it right or wrong. Because right or wrong is way down the road. Wise or unwise is the question to answer right now. And there are a lot of things you wouldn't do if you ask yourself, is it wise or unwise, that you would choose to do if the answer was right or wrong. The answer can never be, is it right or wrong? Because if you're far enough down the path, adultery example. All right. If you're going to commit adultery, if you're far enough down the road that you're asking yourself, is this right or is it wrong? You've made enough unwise decisions already that you're in jeopardy. You have to ask yourself, is this wise or is it unwise? And if it impedes your judgment, you need to stay away from it, because if we're careless long enough, eventually we will become reckless. Last thing, perfection is not required. I'm not a perfectionist. I don't claim to be. I know some other people who are. The danger of being a perfectionist, though, is that it becomes a form of procrastination. Perfectionism will keep you from starting because you don't believe you can get it perfect, so you do nothing. Perfectionism will cause you to work way too long on something that you should have already walked away from a long time ago because it's never good enough. And you keep on and on and on and on and on and on. I went and got a haircut one time, and she was trying to make it perfect until she eventually cut almost all my hair off because, she never could get the line to exactly the way she wanted it. That's a problem. We just keep going and going and going. That's the danger. It's procrastination. Perfection can become a form of procrastination. Either we don't start or we keep on something way long after we should have stopped it. We live in a world, and I grew up in a perfection environment where the church expected perfection. And if you weren't perfect, then what you did was you hid it, because the shame of being imperfect was so bad that it was better to hide it. And then it turned into cancer in folks. And so people held it in and they hid it and until it ate away at them, and it showed up in other places. I don't think God is looking for perfection from us. I do think he is looking for faithfulness. Perfection is not a standard we can live by. Faithfulness is a standard we can live by. So I'm going to read the end of this story, and I'm going to show you a tension that's present. It says this: Moses said to Aaron and his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, take what is left of the grain offering after a portion has been presented as a special gift to the Lord, and eat it beside the altar. Make sure it contains no yeast, for it is most holy. You must eat it in a sacred place, for it has been given to you and your descendants as your portion of the special gifts presented to the Lord. These are the commands I have been given. But the breast and the thigh that were lifted up as a special offering may be eaten in any place that is ceremonially clean. These parts have been given to you and your descendants as your portion of the peace offerings presented by the people of Israel. You must lift up the thigh and the breast as a special offering to the Lord, along with the fat of the special gifts. These parts will belong to you and your descendants as a permanent right, just as the Lord commanded. Moses then asked him, what happened to the goat? That may not be funny to y'all, but I have to play these things out in my mind. We almost titled the sermon, What Happened to the Goat, because this was just so humorous to me. Moses like, what happened to the goat? He said, Moses asked him, what happened to the goat of the sin offering? When he discovered it had been burned up, he became very angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons. Why didn't you eat the sin offering of the sacred area? He demanded. So you understand, and I'm sure y'all have read this already several times. The priest would take the sin offering and then they would eat it. And then they would go in the tabernacle, and it was part of them taking on the sin offering and bearing it before the Lord. That's the symbolism, okay? They're bearing the sin before the Lord. That's why they ate it and they went before the Lord. Okay, so they didn't eat it here. That's the problem. They burn it up, even though they were supposed to have eaten it. It says, it is a holy offering. The Lord has given it to you to remove the guilt of the community and to purify the people, making them right with the Lord. Since the animal's blood was not brought into the holy place, you should have eaten the meat in the sacred area as I ordered you. Then Aaron answered Moses, today my sons presented both their sin offering and their burnt offering to the Lord. And yet this tragedy has happened to me. If I had eaten the people's sin offering on such a tragic day as this, would the Lord have been pleased? When Moses heard this, he was satisfied. They were supposed to eat this offering. It was a commandment by God. Like this was the order of what they were supposed to do. And they didn't do it. And Moses gets angry, but apparently God doesn't. And I don't know, he says, my sons offered their offering and they burn up. He said, on such a day like this, would the Lord have received it? I don't know whether Aaron and the sons couldn't do it because they didn't think God would receive it. I don't know whether they thought they were grieving and they just couldn't bring themselves to do it. This is too heavy of a burden to have to do on a day like the day after our brothers have died. I don't know what the reasoning is for it. What I do know is that they clearly disobeyed the order that God had given them. And God didn't kill them. Y'all understand the bookends of this story? At the beginning of the story, we have two guys who do something and they mock the discernment of God, and God kills them on the spot. At the end, you have two guys who don't do something that's clearly laid out, and we know what they were supposed to have done. He says you were supposed to eat it, and they didn't eat it, and God offers them grace. That is a tension that often we ignore in Scripture, is when these things show up and we say, well, God punished them, but he didn't punish them. And some of you are thinking, well, that's the God of the Old Testament. God don't kill people now. Here's what I don't want to blow anybody's theories, but I'm just going to lay this out for you, that I'm not sure you're 100% right. Because you can go to the book of Acts chapter 5. Jesus has come, Jesus has died, Jesus has risen, Jesus has ascended back to the Father, and Ananias and Sapphira lied to the Holy Spirit, and they dropped dead on the spot because they lied to the Holy Spirit. So you can say, well, that's an Old Testament God, but you can go to the New Testament post-resurrection and see God do the same thing instantly with people who are lying in the presence of God. They've taken something that was sacred, giving an offering, and made it common. And I would tell you, this is important for us to understand. And I think all of us understand the difference between someone who has sincerely made a mistake and someone who is callous and whose heart is not in it, and they're just being mean or hateful, or they've taken us for granted. I think that happens over and over again. We see it from people. If somebody does something we genuinely think they forgot, or they genuinely made a mistake, or they genuinely didn't understand, or they genuinely didn't have time, we'll usually offer grace. But the people who are habitual, they're habitually mean or habitually rude or habitually forget, whatever the case is, after a while, we begin to ask the question, well, is this who they are? in what's going on in their heart. And I do believe it's a matter of the heart with God. I think God looks on our heart and he asks the question, is this a faithfulness issue or is this a carelessness issue? And the two are completely different. Let's see if I can give you an illustration. I didn't ask him permission if I could tell this, but I already told it in the first service, so I'm telling it again. He just happens to be in here. Tuesday in staff meeting, we got to talking about Valentine's Day. And Zach said, as in Zach fashion, okay? Because Zach is one of the most genuinely honest people. Like, there's not any pretense. So if he's asking a question, like he's genuinely asking a question. He says, I want to know something. Is Valentine's the 14th or the 15th? It's the 15th that day, okay? So it's Tuesday about lunchtime. And, okay, so Tuesday the 15th about lunchtime. And so Zach says, he says, one of my kids invited me Tuesday to their ball game or something that was going on. And he said, well, I can't. He said, I'm going to be spending Valentine's with my wife. And the person said back to him, oh, you must have something to do Monday, so you're having to observe Valentine's late. And Zach said, no, it's the 15th, right? And time out, I'm going to pick on him right now. And I love Zach. If I pick on you, that's fine. But I tried to figure out, how did he not know? I mean, from the time you're in daycare, you're having Valentine's parties and bringing Valentine's. And then I realized he was homeschooled, so they probably didn't do that. He probably didn't have parties at his house. And anyway, we got a big laugh out of it. And we said, you can download a Google Calendar and it'll put all the holidays in your calendar and remind you when it's coming. And it's the 14th. And don't miss it. Now, here's what I would tell you. If he genuinely forgot, and I don't know, I'm not even looking at Jess right now. If he genuinely forgot that and thought it was the 15th, we're all going to give him grace, right? As a church, we're going to give him grace because he for some reason thought Valentine's was on the 15th. I don't know how he did that, but he did. And he must like to buy cards on sale. That's terrible. That was a cheap shot. No, I'm sorry. But we're going to give him some grace, right? Around that table, we're going to laugh about it and we're going to give him grace. Guess what? We're not going to do next year. We're not going to give him that same grace. If he comes in and says, it's Valentine's the 14th or 15th, what I'm going to believe is that he don't care or he hadn't thought about it. And we're all guilty of this. Listen. And sometimes we try to plead ignorance or I didn't know or it was a mistake or I'm sorry. When in reality, we have taken our spouse for granted, our God for granted, our job for granted, our friends for granted, our children for granted, and we keep wanting forgiveness when we can't get it because we haven't been faithful, we've been careless. Right. There's a difference between carelessness and faithfulness. God's not looking for perfection, God's looking for faithfulness. You don't get to stand before God because you have done anything to become perfect. You get to stand before God because Jesus paid a price and made you righteous before him. As a matter of fact, Dale mentioned between songs about the priest making us right before God and how we would read in the New Testament. One of the passages in the New Testament tells us in Romans chapter 3, it says, we are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are. For everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God in his grace freely makes us right in his sight. He did this through Christ Jesus when he freed us from the penalty of sins. For God presented Jesus as the sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed his life, shedding his blood. This sacrifice shows that God was being fair when he held back and did not punish those who sinned in times past, for he was looking ahead and including them in what he would do in the present time. God did this to demonstrate his righteousness, for he himself is fair and just, and he makes sinners right in his sight when they believe in Jesus.